You guys, today I have Michelle Patidar with us, and she is a cancer survivor. She has an amazing story. In 2016, at the age of only 32, she was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and had to have 6 rounds of inpatient chemotherapy. And she was on a mission to heal the wounds of treatment. And in response to the program that she went through, she set forth on a detox program to rebuild her health and her immunity. And she is the founder of Revival Health and Wellness. I'm excited for her to share her story with you today about whole health. And you guys, this is a special treat, and her story is absolutely incredible. So get ready. Here we go.
All right, Michelle Patidar, thank you for joining me today on the Happy Whole You podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited for you to share your incredible story with my listeners. When I heard your story, I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible. And I think that your story also gives people a lot of hope. And so I just would love for you to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are and jumping into your profound story.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Michelle. I'm now 40 years old, but I was diagnosed with cancer at 32 years old. I am now a certified integrative nutrition health coach, and I focus on working with people who are looking to prevent cancer, but also cancer survivors who are looking to thrive and rebuild and really heal from the inside out after cancer treatments. A huge part of my story is that I struggled through cancer recovery. When I rang the bell and I walked away from all of my doctors, all of my support system kind of disappeared, and there was no way to navigate this entire journey and path around cancer recovery, which for me was almost harder than the cancer journey in and of itself. There was so many struggles that came up. So I really love to focus on working with survivors and help navigating through these tricky waters to not only heal completely from mind, body, and spirit, but also to help prevent a reoccurrence and to live preventively forever and to help teach the tools on how to do that, because it took me a lot of years to learn how to do that. And it doesn't have to take anybody else a lot of years to learn how to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I love that. And I think that a lot of times, yeah, we don't think about after you've gone through the treatment, after you've beat the cancer, like what support system do you have after that? Like, what do you do? It's like, yeah, it's great. We ring the bell. We're a survivor,
yeah.
but what's next? And I love that you are providing that for people. Um, so what was it like for you going through that? Like when you got that diagnosis, like I'm always curious about people's mindset.
Yeah.
And I know that you were working with your mom before this, and then it's like you get this diagnosis. What went on in your mind to be like, I'm beating this. I'm gonna get through this. Like, what was that like for you?
It's a really good question. So, it's like you said, I was working with my mom. So to preface how my diagnosis went, I always kind of have to tell you a little bit about the year prior to when I was diagnosed. So I was newly married. I was 30 years old, and my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer that spread all over her entire body, and she was given 6 weeks to live. At that point, my husband and I moved her into our house, and we took care of her. We became her caregivers. And she ended up living 6 months versus the 6 weeks. And I saw so many different sides of cancer that one should never have to see, and just really got an upfront seat to the suffering and the different stages of cancer. And becoming a caregiver at 30 years old was completely new to me. Everything, my whole life got completely turned upside down. And I became a parent in a sense. My mom then needed so much help and so much care that our roles completely switched. So my mindset from that point forward was survive. I was in fight or flight 24/7 while taking care of her. And this is because she was in such bad condition that we had to call ambulances every couple of days. She was
Mm.
surviving off blood transfusions, and things were happening to her physically where she could fall and this and that. So I had to be on all the time. So it was incredibly stressful. And then obviously after she passed away, the whole grieving process was really stressful and I really felt stuck in it. There was a lot of trauma that I saw and experienced. I come from a family that we don't have cancer genes in our family. We've never
Mm.
seen anybody suffer. We've never been exposed to illness the way my mom was. So it was a really big shock to me and being so young, I think, as well. But I was so stuck in trauma that it was really hard for me to move forward in my life. And I started going to therapy, and that really helped um, process everything that I saw. So, about 6 months after my mom passed away, I started to have all these different symptoms and side effects of trauma, but also just physical side effects. And I didn't know what was going on. And it ended up being I had a pituitary tumor. It ended
Mm.
up being benign, but I had to get it surgically removed. And I remember thinking, gosh, this is so weird. My husband and I were trying to get pregnant. We couldn't get pregnant, and we realized it was because of the pituitary tumor. So after that was removed, I thought, okay, like this is it. This is my fresh start. I am so
Yeah.
ready to move forward. We want to have a family. I was working the entire time. I was also taking care of my mom. I had a very great corporate job doing training and development. So I was like, I just want to focus on myself and career and family. And I got hit with a cancer diagnosis 6 months after that pituitary tumor was removed.
Wow.
And I specifically remember because I went home for my mom's 1 year memorial. And I was walking and talking with my dad, and he's like, I want you to be able to move forward in your life. All of the bad stuff is behind you. Let's look at this as a new chapter. I just, on some level, my intuition kicked in, and I was like, you know what? I think something else is going to happen. I'm like, I just have a feeling that it's not over, and that like
Mm.
I'm not okay. And everyone around me was like, no, no, it's just because you've been so traumatized and you saw so much, and on some level, I was like, I don't think so. Like, I think something else is going on. And I didn't really have any symptoms of cancer, but I did have a dream about my mom um, right at her 1 year time. And in my dream with her, I was brushing my hair. I got out of the shower and I was brushing my hair, and all my hair started to fall out. And we
Mm.
were chit chatting and we were talking, and then she kind of started to like walk me down a path. And I remember whatever I saw in my dream, which I don't remember, I remember being very terrified and very scared, and I tensed up. And I woke up and it felt like I pulled a muscle in my neck. Like if you almost jerk too fast when you sleep. And I felt like I had a pulled muscle. I'm like, this is weird. And it was a very strange dream. I didn't really think anything of it. But the pain in my neck every single day, almost felt like every hour, amplified. It got worse and
Oh,
worse.
wow.
And so I ended up going into the doctor, and I remember walking and I just joked. I'm like, I just want to make sure I don't have cancer or anything, like ha ha ha, making light of it. And she did some preliminary blood work and was like, I'm sure it's just a pulled muscle, blah, blah, blah. But my blood work came back, and one of the blood levels that measures blood clots was slightly elevated, slightly. And she's like, it's just barely above normal, but that's kind of strange. And if you're walking around with a blood clot, like we need to know that. So we
Yeah.
need to get you
Yeah.
in for an x-ray. And I had an x-ray done, and there was a massive tumor in my chest, 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter. And I actually had 4 blood clots in my left arm because the tumor
Wow.
was pressing on my heart so bad it was restricting everything in
Mm.
my arm. So a lot of people ask me, what were your symptoms? And as much as I would love to say, oh, I had bloating and this, and like I
Yeah.
didn't. I was traveling, I was going on girls' trips and working out, and eating healthy and thinking I was doing the right things. And thankfully, because of that dream, like I wouldn't have caught it as
Yeah.
stage two is what I was diagnosed with as early as I did. So it took, I feel like the whole year leading up to my diagnosis, I think that played a really big piece in my whole journey with stress and with just understanding my body and everything that's out there. So that's what led me to my cancer diagnosis.
Mm. So once you, that is like, by the way, an incredible story. And I think that we should never take our intuition and our dreams lightly,
Mhm.
because I get messages all the time in my dreams. And sometimes we have a hard time remembering. So I always like to like write the things down right when I wake up. Like I'll write down just like a few words just so I can like remember or try to pull it. There's so much information, and our own intuition is so powerful. But I'm not surprised for, that that happened, but at the same time, it's not very common that people are listening to, their intuition, what's going on. So you get this diagnosis, you learn about this, and then what was your approach to healing yourself?
So, and forgive me, I didn't mention your question about mindset too. I will say, like the mindset going into cancer, because I went through so much leading up to cancer. My mindset was when I got the diagnosis, I was like, no, there's no way I can deal with this. I can't take on it anymore. It almost felt like a sick joke. I just felt
Mm.
like I was being kicked while I was already down because I was already struggling so much to get back on track and grieving my mom and just dealing with all of these things. It felt my mindset was so I was so surprised and so shocked. So my mindset as I got the diagnosis was really in a bad place. I was so sad. I
Mm.
was so distraught. Plus, my only experience with cancer was seeing my mom pass away from it. So there's no way,
Yeah.
like that was my association with cancer was that. So it was a really hard pill to swallow. I think things turned, and to address your question now too, like dealing with and healing with cancer, I went through chemo. I went through 6 rounds of chemotherapy, which thankfully enough, my body reacted well to it and it worked. It was a very hard regimen. And my oncologist was actually the person that helped me turn my mindset around
Mm.
because we were very aligned. I wasn't a very holistic person prior to my cancer diagnosis, but I knew that I wanted to live and I knew I wanted to have a family. And she was kind of my guiding light through that. And I feel very fortunate. Her bedside manner was amazing. And she told me, she's like, listen, this is really hard. This is a really hard chemo regimen, but you're young. And I really believe that you can get through it. And I'm going to do everything in my power for you to come out the other end and for you to have kids. She's like, I will see you have kids. I will be by your side. And she was by my side the entire time and was so incredible and walked me through. I'm an information person. So when I would get my blood work back, my mind, I want to know everything. She would sit down for hours and walk me through everything.
Mm.
So when I saw her positivity and her faith, it helped me grasp strength from a place that I didn't even think that I had strength. And
Mm.
it was, I knew in my head, it was an everyday battle of you have to get through this. You have to stay strong, like tunnel vision, like an athlete, get through each round. You can handle this. You were meant to get through this. That's kind of the mental talk that was going through my head because that intuition kicked in where I knew that something else was going to happen, but I also felt like I knew I had to get through this and there's going to be a reason for it. And that was a huge mental shift for me that really got me through all of the cancer treatments that were so incredibly brutal.
Wow. I'm so glad that your oncologist was just that light for you, because I think sometimes, sometimes it's other people believing in us before we can believe in ourselves that gives us that extra light, that extra strength to get through whatever it is. And in your case, I mean, that is a lot for any person to go through. So as you go through these 6 rounds of chemo, was there a, any single moments or moments where like you're like, I know I'm gonna be fine. Like I know, like was there any moment where you finally were like, okay, I feel like I'm out of the woods, or did that
No.
take? No.
I mean, we did scans after like round 3. And I saw that the tumor was shrinking and that my body was responding well to it. So that was obviously like a huge sliver of hope. But so I had inpatient chemo. So I was in the hospital every 2 weeks for 5 days on a continuous drip, and I had 6 different chemo drugs.
Oh,
So it was very intense. So every time I was in the hospital for 5 days, and I was working because I had to keep going in some way.
yeah.
It's just a constant reminder of what's going on all the time. So I never once thought I'm out of the woods at all. Probably even until my 2-year mark is when
Oh,
I really
okay.
started to like breathe through it, because it terrifies you in such a way that I don't know, you kind of lose trust in everything a little bit.
Mm,
And
mm,
I just never wanted to take that for granted or think I was okay. And then boom, you go through another round and you relapse, or your immune system doesn't kick back up to fight off. There's so many things that can happen, and they make you very aware of everything that can happen every step of the way. So it's kind of like I didn't want to have false hope just in case.
mm-hmm.
And then for me, for lymphoma, like the 2-year mark is a big mark of like, okay, your chances of recurrence dramatically drop and everything like that. So that's when I kind of felt like I can take a deep breath.
So when did you shift over into like the integrative nutrition and really start to change your eating habits, just your overall health and well-being to this more holistic side? How did that come about?
Yeah. So after cancer, my body was so completely disheveled. I was on, I think, 3 different antibiotics, obviously all the chemo drugs. No one ever once told me about probiotics or gut health or anything. So you can
Yeah.
imagine I walk out of cancer and I'm starting to eat food and I couldn't digest food. I was so, my gut was so destroyed, and I was so depleted of every nutrient possible that it would just sit in my stomach. I couldn't have that nutrient absorption, which means I
Mm,
couldn't gain energy back. And there was no one there telling me. So I started going to integrative nutritionists and oncology dietitians, and everyone kind of just told me like, well, you're doing everything right. You're eating the right foods. You're eating, small meals. You're trying to get your nutrients up. You're resting. Like, just give it time. Just give it time. Even with my oncologist, she's like, just give it time. I'm like, again, the intuition. I'm like, no, like something's wrong. Like my body isn't breaking down the food, and I can feel that. So I started to realize, and 7 years ago, there wasn't the information out that there is now, nor was there platforms like social media. They weren't as big and up and running as
yeah.
they are now. So I had to figure it out myself. So I started doing research, and I figured out, digestive enzymes and gut health. And I started to just like do everything myself and research it. And I became so in love with it and so addicted to it that I thought, this is really interesting. And if I'm struggling this much after cancer, I can only imagine how many other people are, because cancer touches so many people worldwide.
Yeah.
And I just also started to realize how much the mind is connected to the body, and how my mindset in recovery had to change in order for me to actually get better. I was in such a survival mode from before my
Hmm.
mom and then throughout cancer, that when cancer ended, it's like impossible to heal when you're still in survival mode. So you really had to deal with switching from survival mode into recovery mode to get that full body connection. So I started to put these pieces together, and then I found a program, integrative nutrition program that encompassed all of this: mind, body, soul, food, everything. And I thought, this is made for me. This is perfect. So I became certified. I went through the whole program and fell in love with it even more, and just learned how to really bring everything together. And I feel like from then on, I've just been learning so much every single year. It's pushed me to learn more and more as information comes out. And I consider myself a lifelong learner. And it's really helped me throughout my own health journey because I, of course, have had two kids since then, which I feel very blessed and grateful for. But I've
Yeah.
also had cancer scares and I've had a lot of things come up, especially after pregnancy and all the pressure and inflammation it brought out in my body. There was a
Mm,
lot of things that came up. So it really taught me how to stay open minded with health, how to not everything is what it seems to appear sometimes, and how to kind of dig deeper and navigate my health journey around cancer scares and reoccurrences and anxiety, and use different tools to help myself through that, which now I in turn help other people do based on what I now learned through getting certified, but my own personal experiences, because I feel like I've been through so much, I can really lean in and have empathy towards what other people are going through when they're recovering from cancer and wanting to prevent, because there's so much that we can do on our end.
yeah. Yeah, let's dive into that. What are some things that people can do that, you know, really do move the needle to prevent those cancer cells from being created, spreading, all that? What are some tips that you have for people?
Well, I think, I always say this from day one that gut health is so incredibly important. I think it's the foundation for everything and it houses our immune system, majority of our immune system. And our immune system needs to be up and running to fight cancer
Mhm.
and to fight anything. So, understanding that the food that we're putting in our mouth, fork to mouth, every single day is the most powerful thing that we can have control over and what we can do. How we take care of our gut, how the gut works, you really understanding that and how food is connected to that, but also how stress is connected to that. So my biggest tips are probably like gut health, right? And making sure your gut is nice and strong. Understanding food and how to stay away from ultra processed foods and added sugars and foods with food dyes in them, and really paying attention to whole foods, variety, and diversity, and listening to your body and how our body's reacting when we're eating. Because it's always giving us signals. And
Yeah.
no matter who we are, we're always changing every year, every decade that we get older. Our body is changing and reacting to our environment, our food, our stress completely differently. Our hormones are always changing. So I think like slowing down and really paying attention to that piece of it. I also think it's really important to do home cooking. We are in this age where we can go on our phone, Uber Eats anything. We don't have to move. We just open our door and we can have something there. But understanding what's going into our foods, how it's being prepared, what it's being prepared on, what kind of pots and pans are we using, understanding those environmental pieces
Mhm.
all play a part when we're putting the food in our mouth. That's all things that our body's starting to recognize and work through. And I always say, like, stress is such a big piece. At least for me, I know that stress played
Oh,
such a
yeah.
big part in my hormones and my cancer diagnosis. And it's impossible to avoid, but really having good stress management tools in place and really being able to mitigate the stress in our lives
Mhm.
is incredibly important, and really great places to start with cancer prevention and thinking about reducing cancer risk as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, food, stress, I mean, those are, like, huge. Throw sleep in there. I mean, these are, like, just things we do every single day, and I think people just sometimes discount the little things they're doing every day, done over time, that are causing the most healing or causing the most damage. And so I always tell my clients it's not what we're doing every once in a while. Maybe you get the ice cream or, you eat out, but it's literally what we're doing every single day that is compounding that makes the biggest difference in our overall health and well-being.
I totally agree. The habits, the invisible habits and the
Yeah.
visible habits really create the foundation for our health. What you're doing first thing in the morning, everything, those small habits add up. And I think that's why, a lot of people will talk about like the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of the
Hmm.
time of what you're doing is the impactful stuff, having the ice cream, going out to dinner here and there. That's not what's going to completely
Yeah.
throw you off. But, if you're waking up stressed out every single morning, it takes a toll. It takes a toll on our body, and all of that stuff adds up. So I couldn't agree more with you on like how important daily habits are for the foundation of health. Truly.
Yeah. And also the feedback that you mentioned about when we eat, when I'm talking with clients and we're talking about food sensitivities that they have, like some people are sensitive to almonds and then other people are like, I thought almonds were healthy, right?
Right.
It's like, is your body reactive or non-reactive first? I mean, we all kind of know in general what's healthy and unhealthy, but then you take it a step further. Is my body reactive or non-reactive? And I think people forget that your body is giving you that feedback, those signals. So it's like if you're getting burpy or like your stomach kind of hurts or you get really tired after you eat, these are all signs that your body is having a hard time digesting food. So I like how you brought up digestive enzymes. Those can make a big difference for people, probiotics, all of that. What would you say are like if you think about yourself in your 20s compared to, okay, now you're in your 40s, what would you say are like maybe 2 or 3 things that maybe you used to do that you're like, I can't believe I did that, or I put that in my body, or like, whatever.
Everything. I mean, everything. And it's when I actually saw something on social media the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, it couldn't be more true. But it was some post where it's like, you were in tanning beds and
Oh,
partying
yes,
and
yes,
eating fast food 24/7 and staying up late, pulling all-nighters, cramming for college, party, like all of those things just add up. And
yes,
I think I probably did all of that in my 20s, 1,000%.
yes, yes.
But I will say, like, even like right before my cancer diagnosis, like I thought I was doing everything right. I was working out 5 days a week and I thought I was eating healthy. And when I look back and see now, as my health has evolved, really, really something that has been a game changer for me is getting to know my body and myself. For me, as when I was younger, doing HIIT workouts 5 days a week did so much more detriment for me. Might not be for
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
else in my body, like how I processed it. And there were signs and signals that you can easily explain away, and you're young, you bounce back, like it's no big deal. But looking back now, it was like, oh, if I would have listened to my body or just understood that we're not all the same. In the same sense you were
Mhm,
saying about almonds, I might be able to tolerate them, you might not. We are all so individual in certain things, and
mhm.
understanding that, like, getting to know what your body is doing, how it processes, how it functions is like one of the biggest blessings that I've ever had. It makes you be so much more intuitive about your health. But definitely back then, I mean, I was eating fast. The problem mostly like the ultra processed food, even the ultra processed food that I thought was healthy, like, oh, like
Yeah.
the Chick-fil-A because it has like grilled nuggets versus, ultra processed foods were so abundant. And in college and when you're young and you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
money for you're not focusing on Whole Foods when you're, young,
No.
on the go, and living in Chicago and in college. Like that wasn't the reality. So I
Yeah.
definitely feel like the biggest game changer was like the food for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can relate to everything you said. And when I was in college, you could still smoke in bars in
Yeah.
Michigan. And I remember we would go out and we would party. And the next day, I couldn't like talk. I would have the most raspy voice because of breathing in all that smoke. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I did that for like quite some time. So I
Yeah.
was like, and then yeah, and then you would go to like Jimmy John's at like getting the processed deli meat sandwiches or ordering a pizza at, 2 a.m. and yeah, and then not sleeping and getting caffeine the next day. And It's amazing.
Chasing it down with some Gatorade and
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I think we've all been through that, but I think the most remarkable thing in what your life has shown is that when we're putting in the right things, when we're doing the right things, our body has the mechanism to heal itself. And so I think that's like the most important thing for all of us to remember, is because if we're giving the body the right things and we're managing our stress, we're getting the sleep, our body responds in such a beautiful way. But it is knowing those things, because, I remember I used to, back in the day, we were taught to eat low fat and then to count your calories and all of that. So I remember there was a time where I was just getting like those lean cuisines, frozen dinners. It was like, oh, there's only 220 calories, of putting it in the microwave. And like, I cringe when I think about the things that, we used to do. But anyways, it's now we can choose differently when we know differently and we have that knowledge, and let our body start recovering. Really important.
I think I totally agree. I love that. Yeah, our body wants to heal. I truly believe that. Our body wants to heal, and sometimes we just have to remove the obstacles and figure out why it's not healing. And I think it gets harder and harder to do that as we evolve too. And with all the environmental stuff around us, things that we can't control, that makes it harder as well. But, now for me, knowledge is power. And I think that's a big part of what I do on social media with my clients, everything. Like, the more we can talk about the things that we can control and that do work, the better off we'll be. And sometimes it's the simplest swaps and switches that we can do that really can yield big results, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think, like, start small and then just build off of that. And it does come back to those habits. So, switching your coffee in the morning to a big glass of water first, and then, okay, have your coffee if you want coffee, or eventually switch to tea. I mean, there's all these swaps and add-ins that we can do. And, but yeah, starting small is important. So, Michelle, where can everybody find you, connect with you, and just keep learning more about what you're up to?
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me on Instagram at revival.health.wellness, or my website, revivalhealthwellness.com. All my information's on there, and I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm looking forward to our Instagram Live that we'll be doing coming up by the end of the month.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.